Why am I qualified to talk about sleep? I'm an appalling sleeper. I've had two opportunities. One would be my dad, bless him. He slept like a log, never had any problems. One inheritory trait would be my mum. She's an awful sleeper. I'm like my mum. So I have to work really hard at it. And, you know, in my teenage years, I used to sort of compromise my sleep. Then I got into advertising and then technology came along. So I have to work really hard at getting the appropriate amount of sleep. And we're all having to work hard these days, and that's why we're talking, because, you know, none of us really are getting as much sleep as we would have had prehistorically. Prehistorically, we'd have put sleep first and awake second. These days, we've got more time to fill. You know, we were actually stressing out. We're putting more and more into our lives. So we're trying to balance that sort of 24/7 lifestyle and the need to get sleep, because that's when the body and the brain recuperates. My background is, I became an osteopath because I had a bad back. I became a hypnotherapist because I needed sort of help with certain choices that I wasn't making. And I became a sleep coach because I'm bad at sleeping and managed to solve it. So hopefully I've got some ideas about your own struggle and my own struggle and how to get a good night's sleep. So we're going to talk to you about some of the science of sleep. Then I'm going to move on to what you'd regard as standard sleep tips. Everybody's got a different sort of avenue into poor sleep, but most of the time, sleep hygiene will help you improve poor sleep. It won't cure insomnia. There's a different technique to that, which the NHS cover with CBTI. So that's a different route that we're not going to talk about today. We'll talk about that in the next course. And then we'll come on to some practical tips. So we'll have a bit of break. Hopefully you'll have time to fill in a short questionnaire. And, you know, it'll take about an hour and a half, and hopefully you'll have some questions by the end of this. So we'll go to the first slide, which is an introduction to what we're going to cover: sleep science, sleep tips, some practical ideas. So we're going to go through sleep clocks, we're going to go through sleep windows, we're going to go through why we need sleep, what we need sleep for, and we're going to talk a little bit about chronotypes. Chronotypes is the bit that we really need to sort out on a personal basis. What type of sleeper am I? Am I a morning lark? Am I a night owl? I'm an average person. And that's the bit that we all seem to sort of get wrong, because we do have a personal sleep trait. And once you get that right, once you can work out how to fit sleep as a priority, you can fit everything around it. And then we'll talk a little bit about why men don't sleep enough. We'll talk a little bit about why women too, but that's covered off more in the next course, because more women have sleep problems than men. Men have a poor attitude to sleep, but women tend to struggle a little bit more because of the cycle and other things. So we'll come on to the first slide. I hope you can see this. There's two ways that our sleep is balanced. One is by the circadian rhythm, the body clock, and one's by sleep homeostasis. That's a sort of check on how much sleep you're getting. So we've got this rhythm that's in tune with the planet, and we have a 24-hour cycle that's tuned to day and night. And then we've got this sort of chronometer that measures sleep. So when you look at the typical circadian rhythm, the top bit is when we're asleep. We have changes in blood pressure, we have changes in body temperature, we have changes in hormones such as melatonin and cortisol, which are the two key drivers of sleep. And we have different blood pressure going through the day. So we have this 24-hour cycle that our brain is trying to keep us to. It becomes more efficient if we stay in this cycle, because the body knows when to produce the certain hormones that we need to convert our food into energy. That is something that the body's trying to do on a 24-hour basis. So being regular with that, even though we wouldn't have been regular prehistorically, we certainly would have ate food when we could get it, and we wouldn't have had it when we didn't. In the modern cycle, the more we can keep things regular, it seems that the easier the body has to deal with it, and that's sleep as well. So coming on to the next one. We talked about melatonin briefly. Melatonin is called the sleep hormone. Why? It's because it gives you the urge to sleep. It's produced in the absence of light. So it's produced as it starts to dim, and it peaks somewhere around 3 o'clock in the morning. This hormone is produced as the light stops shining in your eyes. There's a receptor at the back of your eyes that starts to produce melatonin, and that's produced in the pineal gland, and then it starts to give us the desire to nod off. It doesn't make us sleep. It's that bit where you're watching the TV on the couch and all of a sudden you've gone. That's melatonin kicking in. The interesting thing is it's blocked by light, and in particular a wavelength of light called blue light, which you'll probably read a lot about in the press, which is why technology becomes such an issue. in terms of stopping the circadian rhythm. It's actually worse for kids than it is for us. And the worst thing to do for a child would be to watch a device in a black room. So in a dark room, putting a bright light next to your eyes actually stops melatonin at 300 times better than it would do if you're watching it in a light room. So the worst thing to do is to allow your kid to sneak the phone. You may as well give it to him and say, go ahead, use it in night. You know, you're better off really being clear with your boundaries, which we'll come up to later. So that's what we were talking about. It actually rises up to 3 o'clock in the morning, then it drops off. And then we'll go to the next one. So we combine that. Hopefully you can see the yellow chart, which is actually cortisol. Cortisol is the other key hormone that we have that's related to sleep. It's produced by stress. So stress before sleep actually produces the hormone that wakes us up. It's not a great thing to be stressed, but you know, some of us can't get away from it because we've got too much in our lives. But certainly the combination of melatonin helping us get the desire to sleep and cortisol giving us the desire to wake up is how the body's arranged that. Prehistorically, it would have made sense. You know, the species were created around the equator, 12 hours a day, 12 hours a night. Why not have a hormone that works in the absence of light? Why not have a hormone that wakes you up with light? That makes sense because now I'm in tune with the planet and I'm asleep when it's safe and I'm awake when I want to hunt. That makes sense. But obviously in the modern world, we can control our light. Edison very kindly invented the light bulb. We think that took an hour off our sleep. And then we have blue light from technology. We think that took the other hour of sleep. So on average, we're sleeping 2 hours less than we would have done 100 years ago. And that's why we're talking today, because we have a sleep crisis in the world. We are underslept, which has all of the consequences that we'll talk about in a minute. What I've put on there is the three. They're called zeitgebers. They're the influences of sleep. So you've got melatonin that peaks in the night. You've got cortisol that peaks very early and then it drops off again. And you've got body temperature. The third thing that helps us sleep is a decrease in body temperature. And I'll be talking to lots of people this time of the year about how do you get to sleep in the summer heat. I'll never be talking to people, how do you get to sleep in the cold? Because we all have our rooms warmer than we would have done. It's around 16 to 18 degrees centigrade is where we should be setting a bedroom to give us a good night's sleep. Above 22, you've got a problem. You can't get your body temperature down to the level that it would prehistorically have got to initiate sleep. And it makes sense because as the sun goes down, it gets colder. So why not add something else to the urge to sleep, which is a decrease in body temperature. Equally, if I'm not trying to pump my body temperature up, I've got the energy as an animal to do other things at night. So I'm restoring the body and the brain at night rather than burning energy, keeping myself warm. I don't need to. So the other zeitgeber, the key, is body temperature. Coming to the next one. That's a graph of adenosine. Adenosine is the byproduct of the production of energy in the brain. We burn something called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. That's our energy source. It's what we get when we convert sugar to energy. It's what the cells use. And as you burn that in the brain, you get a waste product called adenosine. Adenosine sits in little receptors, and it's a bit like a sand timer. When you turn it upside down, you've got all the sand draining into the sand timer. Adenosine's like that, and it builds up during the day. And presumably, by the time it gets to a certain height, we've had enough of being awake and we want to switch ourselves up. So we get a peak, as you'll see with the red chart, and then we start to sleep and it goes all the way down. Put caffeine in the mix, you don't get that. Adenosine is blocked by caffeine, which is why coffee is such a great way of keeping yourself awake. It sits in the same receptor, so your brain can't register the fact that you've been awake 8 hours. It still thinks you've only been awake 3 because you've got caffeine sitting in the way of the brain registering that you've been awake. So if you want to stay awake, somebody like myself, if I drink caffeine anywhere after lunchtime, I will not get to sleep on time. I've got friends that can drink it half an hour before bed. They're fine. But as a sample of one, put caffeine near me after lunchtime, I've had it. So when you put these two together, you get these sleep windows. So you have the urge to sleep, created by melatonin in the absence of light, and you have the need for sleep that's dictated by the amount of hours that you've been awake. They combine that need versus the urge combined somewhere for the average person between 10 and 12 at night. And they now know the importance of this. We now know that if you're somebody that needs to get to sleep between 10 and 12 at night, not only did the amount of hours that you get improve, but the quality of your sleep improve and the quality of what it does for your body. There's a 25% increase in heart disease for people who need that window who don't get it. So for somebody like myself, if I want to increase my risk of a heart attack, all I've got to do is to go to bed after 12. I've got a 25% increase. And these sorts of stats are becoming more and more clear about our natural sleep window dictates quality and quantity. We've got this other little urge somewhere around the siesta period. There's still a debate as to whether that's hardwired into us genetically, because certainly our sleep propensity is hardwired into us genetically. The time that we want to go to sleep at night is dependent on our genes. But this thing in the lunchtime called the siesta, we're not sure about. There seems to be a gene about it, but there also seems to be cultural pressure on it. And certainly if we were having our conversation in Japan, we'd be having a lunchtime nap. It is part of the culture. In the Mediterranean era as well, part of the culture. In fact, they've done tests in Greece. They've looked at populations in the mainland don't have naps. Population in the islands do have naps. People in the islands tend to live 5 years longer. So there's something about a nap that creates a decrease in stress and an increase in longevity. We're not sure whether it's genetically predisposed, but certainly if you ever want to catch up on a nap, catch up on sleep, a nap is a good thing to do. So we're coming to this chart. Hopefully you can see it. It shows those of us that are getting older, we need slightly less sleep. That's not the truth. We get slightly less sleep. We're not able to get as much sleep as we used to for a variety of reasons that we'll come on to later. But the average sleep advice is to get somewhere between 7 and 9 hours. That's for the average person. As we talked about, some people need less. They've got a predisposition to need less genetically. And then some people need slightly more. But on average, 7 to 9 hours. How do you know if you've had a good night's sleep? Wake up with an alarm and you still feel refreshed. That would be the acid test of it. You know, very few of us do that, but certainly if you can get to that habit, if you can drive your sleep routine so that you're able to sleep without an alarm, that would be the sort of perfect night's sleep. We talk about 7 to 9 hours, but actually we sleep in cycles. So we get this cycle of sleep where we start off with light sleep, we go to deep sleep, and then we have this thing called REM sleep, and those cycles go through the night. So on average, those cycles last around 90 minutes. On average, we'll get 5 of them. And if anybody's using those sort of smart alarm, Fitbit type stuff, what it's trying to do is to judge when the end of one of those cycles is and wake you up at the end of it. Now, obviously there's lots of variation between it, and we'll talk about that in the middle. But also, you know, if you think about having a nap, if I nap for 20 minutes, I'm pretty much going to wake up in the light sleep. If I nap for 60 minutes, I may wake up in the deep sleep phase. And if any of you have done that, you'll know what that grogginess feels like. If any of us have been on like Anthony was talking about going on a flight, you hit the alarm when you're right in the middle of deep sleep. It takes you about 30 minutes to come around because you're in that phase. And it's not that your body is asleep, it's that your brain's asleep. The wavelength of deep sleep is significantly different than the wavelength of being awake. It's a delta wave, it's a deep sleep wave, and it restores the brain in a very specific way. Sleep stages, we start off with light sleep. Very light sleep is when you're falling asleep. We then go into a stage where we're getting some of our memory consolidated. Light sleep, you can be woken up by sound right at the start, but eventually sound won't wake you up. And it's a transition phase between being awake and being asleep. You then go into something called deep sleep, which when you look at the way that sleep science and sleep coaches approach it, they'll start to focus on quality of deep sleep. Why? Because the brain is detoxified during this process. And there's a link between brain detoxification and Alzheimer's that's proven now. And what happens is that we lose 90% of the byproducts of the waste at night. So if we're not detoxifying at night, these beta amyloids and plaques build up which is one of the precursors of Alzheimer's. So we now know that the brain detoxifies at night. It happens in deep sleep. We also know that growth hormone is produced during this phase. So we know that growth hormone repairs, restores the body, and is important for growth. We also know that the immune system is replenished in this phase. Immune system obviously more important in times of late. And if you get a good night's sleep versus somebody who gets a bad night's sleep, the night after your vaccine, you'll produce 50% more antibodies. It's that important to the immune system. So it's a key part of sleep. And then we move on to REM sleep when we dream. Again, that's something that we'll focus on as a sleep coach, because if you disrupt that process, you lose the ability to focus clearly, and you lose your emotional stability. And that's where the sort of phrase is, did you get out the wrong side of the bed this morning? That's because we haven't had the REM sleep. We haven't had our dream sleep. Dreams restore us emotionally. When we're dreaming about something, the thing that we're dreaming about emotionally fits. The thing that we're dreaming about mentally doesn't. Your dreams sort of bomb around, and the dreams are trying to link your short-term memory to your long-term memory. That's why the idea is, if you have a problem, go to bed, sleep on it. Because our memory's trying to work things out for us as we dream. But the emotion of the dream is very specific. So if I've had a bad day and a frightening day, I'll probably have a frightening dream. If I've had a road traffic accident, I'm not likely to dream about winning the FA Cup that night. You know, so our dreams are a rinsing of our emotions, and it helps us to regain emotional stability. So coming on to the next one, you'll see, hopefully, that the blue bands right at the end, they represent REM sleep. The bars at the bottom represent deep sleep, and you'll see that we get more REM sleep at the back end of the night and more deep sleep at the front end of the night. Now, presumably, as a species, we need energy. You know, we're prehistoric, we need energy, so that makes sense. If I'm going to allow sleep to go through all of its cycles, I may as well give the animal energy first and make its brain work second. So the energy is more important, because without energy we can't hunt. So it makes sense for us to get a lot of deep sleep at the front of the night, just in case we're not getting a full night's sleep. And this REM sleep happens at the end of the night. And that's just how it is. And you can't change that. So if we cut our sleep short, it's the REM sleep that we tend to lose more than the deep sleep. If you absolutely wreck your sleep, what's really interesting is that the next night, you'll get an increase in deep sleep first. So you get, in a rebound situation, your brain and your body will restore deep sleep first at the expense of all the other sleep. And it seems to be that we'll have about 25% deep sleep, 25% REM sleep, and 50% light sleep. And people think that light sleep pads the rest of it. So if you sort of decrease REM sleep, you don't get more deep sleep. If you decrease REM sleep, you tend to get more light sleep. So light sleep seems to be what we get when we don't get enough of the other two, but we're not sure, because science is evolving. That's a chart to show you what happens when you get to my age. You don't get deep sleep, because at the bottom of it, you can see that right at the top, you get a lot of the deep sleep. So we're coming sort of down to here. This is the deep sleep stages, but as you get to my age, you don't get them. And also, the quality of your cycles change. The first chart, the higher chart, shows you that there's a structure to it. So I go quite easily into the cycles, they repeat. My sleep becomes more predictable, it becomes less broken. As I get older, I lose the ability to get into deep sleep as easily. My brain doesn't get there quite as easily, and there's ways around it. But certainly, as we get older, we get less sleep, which is why when you come to the chart, it's not recommended that old people sleep less, it's just that on average. And that's what the chart really is trying to show you, is what do people get on average? What's the sort of benchmark we should be sort of considering in terms of hours of sleep? And certainly as we get older, we sleep less. We have to be more conscious of how much we drink late at night, and we tend to get lighter sleep in general. So coming to the next chart, that's just a chart to show you what it does for the brain. Sleep is involved in memory consolidation, it's involved in cognitive processes, it's involved with speed of thinking, it's involved with our emotional stability. Every single cognitive function in your brain is determined by sleep. And what's interesting is that in terms of the sort of quality of our thinking, it's from the frontal cortex, the cerebral cortex, and at the back we've got the amygdala, which is the emotional center, and we have a sort of tug of war between it. And the frontal cortex, it's sort of soothed by sleep. Its ability to function is regulated at its base level. The amygdala, because of the emotions that's going through it at night, if you get sleep deprived and stressed, the amygdala goes up in activity and the frontal cortex goes down in activity. So we become more emotional. We can't control our emotions as well if we don't sleep. And that's because the frontal cortex gets restored during sleep. So our ability to think and function creatively is designed through sleep, particularly the REM part of sleep, the dream part of sleep. So coming to the next chart. That's a chart on sleep loss, but it's looking at what happens in different parts of the body. The brain we've talked about. We haven't talked about the muscles. The muscles don't get enough growth hormone. If you lose sleep and you're somebody that does a lot of exercise, you'll start to take calories out of your muscle, not your fat. If you're trying to lose weight, you hold on to it. So muscle and body fat related to sleep. The heart, we get an increase in blood pressure, we get an increase in heart disease if we don't sleep. The gut's an interesting one. Our gut goes to sleep with us. Our gut hormones, gut biome is really important to us in terms of the hormones they help create. They have sleep cycles that are the same as ours, 90 minutes. 90% of the serotonin in the body, the hormone of mood regulation, is in the gut, not in the brain. 90% of the signals go from the gut to the brain. So, you know, we have a gut reaction to things. So our emotional center tends to be, and our sort of mood stability tends to be related to gut hormones. And certainly they drive our sleep and are influenced by the sleep. They looked at the gut biome of people with jet lag, and they were very similar to a diabetic gut. And certainly as we lose sleep, we change our metabolism. The hormone that tells us we're hungry increases, the hormone that tells us we're full decreases. And if you look at the worldwide incidence of obesity, it seems to go in line with the worldwide decrease in sleep. The less you sleep, the hungrier you get, and you don't actually crave the good foods, you crave sugar dense and fat foods. And certainly, you know, there's a increase in obesity in the UK, particularly childhood obesity, and there's a definite association with poor sleep and weight gain, particularly for children. And it's driven by the foods they crave. It's very hard to give a child who's tired of carrot. It's very easy to give them a piece of sweets. You know, and it just seems to be the way that we reward children. You know, you've been a good boy, have a sweet. You've been a great girl, have a cake. We don't say you've been a great girl, you know, eat your veg. Vegetables aren't treats. There was a guy called Richard Bannerman. He very cleverly invented neuro-linguistic programming. And he used to give his children the ice cream at the start of the meals, and he goes, look, if you don't have that, there's no way you're having your veg. And he had to set up vegetables that way because we don't naturally want food that doesn't taste sweet. And that's why the problem of sweet foods equals things that we want. We don't have to persuade a kid to like sweet foods. We don't have to persuade ourselves to like sweet foods. The body has a propensity to look for energy. So to give sweets a sort of thumbs up as a present is probably the biggest single mistake of my career as a dad. Anyway, we come back. Are you a morning lark or a night owl? We've now got this thing called Are You a Dolphin? Dolphins are close to human beings, and it seems to be the phrase that we've sort of invented. When it comes to morning larks versus night owls, the idea is prehistorically there was an advantage in not having all of us asleep at one moment because we were more protected. So when you looked at the fire and how you're going to monitor a fire, if I get some people to go to bed early and some people to stay up late, I've got cover. I've got some protection. So about 20% of us are predisposed to go to bed early, 20% are predisposed to go bed late. And when you look at the secretion of those hormones that we were talking about, melatonin secretion in a night owl and body temperature decrease in a night owl occurs later at night. There is a way of shifting it, which is to get out very early in the morning, which we'll talk about when we come to the sleep tips. But certainly there's questionnaires online that talk about sleep propensity. There's a clever guy called Michael Bruce, Dr. Michael Bruce in America, who's taken this to another level. And certainly we do have changes to our chronotype, which is our sleep preference. They are related to our hereditary. Thanks, Mum. They are hereditary in terms of 30% or so of our sleep traits are hereditary. And you can't change a night owl to a morning lark, but you can change a night owl to go to bed later. But you're still going to have that problem in that sleep quality as well as sleep quantity, is finding that sweet spot, the spot where you naturally feel tired, the spot where you're naturally producing melatonin. So coming to the last chart, we talked a little bit about men and sleep, myself and Anthony, when we were putting the presentation together. Women actually get less sleep than men. We'll talk about that more in the next seminar because of the cycle, because of menopause, because of childbirth, because of being the primary carer. When you look statistically at women's sleep over their whole lifespan, women tend to get less sleep than men. Women have a better attitude to sleep than men. Women have a better attitude to health than men. Women take better care of themselves than men. And sadly for us men, we seem to have attached masculinity to poor sleep. I don't know if you remember Donald Trump. Back in the days, he was boasting when he was in the election process of how little sleep he had and how much Sleepy Joe needed. I'm more of a man because I sleep less than you. And they did some tests in America on this, and they hid those questions amongst a health questionnaire. And certainly, despite all the evidence to suggest that we should be sleeping properly, men still think I'm more of a man if I sleep less than you. And the social media and all of the media still report it that way. They still seem to, you know, I do this thing called Clubhouse, and I'll go on and do sort of rooms on sleep for people. And it's like, most people want to see if they can get 8 hours quality in 6 hours. Most people want to sleep less because we've got so much to do. We've got social media, we've got the internet. Back in the day, when it got to 11 o'clock, TV finished for me. So as a kid, I had nothing other to do than to go to bed and go to sleep. You know, these days our children are fighting sleep. They want to be alive, they want to be on social media. There's so much to do and it's exciting. We'll come to a chart right at the end that shows us the consequences of that. But certainly when it comes to the male attitude to sleep, myself included, I don't particularly enjoy going to sleep. It's not fun. I've not been sold it. You know, my childhood was quite the opposite. If I was a good guy, I stayed up late to watch Match of the Day. So I've now been given sleep deprivation as a reward. And I was sent to my bedroom if I was naughty. I've now been given my bedroom as a punishment. And hopefully we'll talk a little bit about that in the second seminar. Why do we give our children a laptop to play with when we've got too much to do? When we're time poor, we choose certain events to distract them, or you've been good and have some sweets. There's lots of ways that we need to sell sleep to our children. And the best way is to lead by example, I think. We were talking about that before. So we've got the sleep tips. Hopefully the sleep science makes sense. Please ask some questions at the end of the presentation. We're going to have a break after this next bit on sleep tips. But I've designed them around the things that I'm most often asked about. There's other tips that we can talk about. But these 10 seem to talk more about routines, food and drink, and then some ideas about the bedroom environment and particularly boundaries around technology. So the first one is one that you'll hear a lot about, that when we sort of alluded to it at the start of the presentation, which is your body clock is set up to be roughly consistent 7 days a week. And it's about 100,000 lux. Once you go inside, you're dropping below 1,000. So there's a huge variation. So getting bright light in the morning stimulates cortisol, it wakes us up, but it also strengthens your circadian rhythm. It protects you against blue light exposure at night. And they've shown that people who get a lot of bright sunlight in the morning actually cope with technology better. The light effect of it isn't as impactful. And in fact, the strength of your circadian rhythm depends on the difference between bright mornings and dark nights. So the brighter you can get it in the morning, go outside, get some exercise, the better. When you wake up, pull the curtains. But get a lot of light straight into your eyes. It wakes you up. And you can pull your circadian rhythm forward by getting that light exposure earlier, particularly just after that bottom of your temperature. And they've shown in tests in America that people that get bright light exposure around 4 a.m., even if they go back to sleep, they can pull their body clock forward by doing that, because it's signaling to the body that you're in a different time zone. So light wakes us up, dark puts us to sleep. And light is really important. Eat right for sleep. The most recent information around metabolism suggests that we should have breakfast for a king. Without a shadow of a doubt, we were designed to eat very, very early. We're actually designed to not eat every day. You know, when you look at these 5 and 2 diets, there is evidence that the kidney switches between a hormone that gives you new cells if you've got the energy to produce it, but it will reuse the old cells, it will repair old cells. So there's a decreased cancer risk to 5 and 2 diets. But more importantly, when it comes to eating, we're supposed to eat breakfast for a king, lunch for a prince, and dinner for a pauper. Or the Chinese version of it would be keep your breakfast to yourself, share your lunch with your friend, and give your dinner to your enemy. So all cultures have this idea that breakfast is big, evening meals are poor. We'll come about the timing of an evening meal later on. But if you can eat all the colours of a rainbow, you'll get all the nutrients. If you can look at decreasing the amount of sugar, you'll improve your sleep. If you can increase the amount of certain vitamins like magnesium, seems to be one that we talk about a lot, because magnesium is used in a lot of systems and it helps with the sleep process in production of melatonin. So melatonin is helped by magnesium. Vitamin C is important. They've done tests on that. They've shown that people who eat kiwi fruit late at night seem to sleep better. Why? Because vitamin C is actually the key vitamin for us. In my mind, we should all be supplementing with it. I do it 500 milligrams every day. Why? Because it's used in so many different systems. The immune system, the repair of the body. It helps with virtually every production system. So for me, vitamin C is a key one. And it's been shown that vitamin C deficiency has an impact on sleep. So does vitamin D. The sun, getting out in the day, definitely gives you vitamin D. But we're told now to supplement vitamin D in the UK. Vitamin D gives you problems with getting to sleep, and it seems to give you daytime tiredness. So there's a few vitamins that stand out, but in general, a wide range of all the colours of the rainbow, some meat, some fish, as little complex processed carbs as you can get, and also look after your gut biome. We talked about it. Things like yogurt, live yogurt, that sort of fermented foods help with your gut biome. Drink for sleep means drinking water. Sadly, it doesn't mean drinking alcohol and drinking caffeine. Caffeine has a half-life of 12 hours. So if you have it at 12 o'clock, half of it's still working at 12 o'clock at night. So it's difficult. All of us have different propensities to drink caffeine. It is the biggest single drug in the world. It's the second most traded commodity after oil in the world. And certainly it's on its increase in terms of the amount of consumption. It's the most drank drink outside of the home. Tea still wins inside the house, but caffeine in all of its forms is drunk outside of the home, in terms of soda, in terms of coffee, for sure. And again, work out your boundaries around coffee. It will keep you awake. It's a great stimulant. It's used as a performance-enhancing drug in sport because it increases adrenaline and it improves muscle power. So it's useful if you want to push it. And I tend to suggest to people, have coffee about an hour and a half after you've woken up. Don't have it straight away. Try and use it to, you get this sort of peak of cortisol straight after you wake up. So you don't really need to drive yourself that hard if you've not got the habit. And we tend to find that for a lot of us, myself included, when I used to work in advertising, I used to use alcohol to knock myself out as a sedative and caffeine to get myself going in the morning. It's what a lot of us do. Alcohol too close to bedtime, yes, it's a sedative, it will help you get to sleep, but it disrupts REM sleep. And we'll come to the boundaries around that later. But certainly water, drink as much of it as you feel in the day. A litre, yes, we think that's around the right amount. Hydration in the day will help you sleep better at night for sure, but alcohol and caffeine, be careful with. When it comes to the next chart, take regular exercise. Exercise and deep sleep go together. When you look at the amount of sleep that sports people get, people like Roger Federer is sleeping 11, 12 hours. Usain Bolt used to talk about sleep as being his third coach. So we tend to get more sleep if we exercise more. Why? Because we need more growth hormone, and growth hormone is produced in deep sleep, and deep sleep seems to be the bit that we feel dead to the world. So sleep quality and sleep quantity tends to go up the more you exercise. 20 minutes a day, 3 days a week is enough to improve your sleep versus somebody who doesn't exercise at all. So exercise and sleep, preferably in the morning. There's evidence that for women, mornings are more important. For evenings, men seem to sort of get more out of exercise in the evening in terms of muscle growth. So we tend to put on more muscle if that's what we're trying to do with exercise late on, whereas women have a better metabolism first thing. Nobody knows why, it just happened to be what came out in the recent research. But if you're exercising at night in a gym, be wary. The bright lights will keep you awake. And if you do it too close to bedtime, you'll increase the amount of adrenaline in your system, which will keep you awake, but also you won't get your body temperature down, which you need to do. So timing of exercise really to fit around your lifestyle, but be more careful in the evening than in the day. Have a tech curfew. We were talking about it it's not just for yourself, it's for an example to your family. And it seems to be that the more I talk about boundaries around tech, the more problems that we seem to unearth. We'll talk about it later in terms of the impact of technology on the hormones in the body. But certainly it's not just about the blue light. There's a lot of information about blue light because it's the light wavelength that keeps us awake. And it's the light wavelength that's produced by computer screens. If you've got a Kindle, it doesn't produce it. If you've got a computer screen, it does. If a TV produces a small amount, a light bulb produces a small amount. And it seems to be that technology in all of its guises is the thing that most interrupts our sleep when we don't plan to. That's the difference between tech use, is that, I can go and watch a TV program. I know that it's going to finish at a certain time. In fact, back in the day, we used to say, don't put the TV on to sleep. Now we're saying, by all means, put it on as long as it's a boring program, because we know the TV is better than allowing somebody to go on a computer. The thing with tech is that we often spend more time on it than we plan to. And it's stimulating in a way that we're not sure about. And to such a degree that those people who use apps in bed are 60% more likely to grind their teeth than people who don't. When they asked the researchers why, they literally said it's fear of missing out. Once you're on it, you're involved in it. Once you're off it, you're wondering what's going on. And certainly I'll have conversations with parents that will say, you know what? If my child loses their phone, they're having a panic attack. So we are attached to our technology more than we are to ourselves. This is probably the biggest single thing you can do as a first step if you're having trouble sleeping, which is to work through a routine that you implement on the way to bed. We can't, if you think about the prehistoric animal that we are, we'd be winding down at night. We wouldn't have anything to do. Our brains wouldn't be active. Our bodies certainly weren't going outside because we'd have been eaten. So I'm slowing down and my brain's slowing down and I'm becoming more relaxed. And I'm not thinking about much. There's an idea now that we have more thoughts in 1 week than a cave person would have had in their entire life. So the amount of information we're processing, the amount of thinking that we do is off the Richter scale versus what we prehistorically would have been coping with. So part of my problem is I'm going to go to bed, I'm going to be thinking about tomorrow because I've got too much to do in too little time. You can do that with a brain dump. You can put a to-do list in that way. Don't do it in bed. Why not? Because you're still going to be thinking when you're trying to go to sleep. Or if you know that that's you, why not put the book next to your bed so you can write it down? So certainly brain dumping to-do lists, keeping work out of the way is one of the boundaries. And then looking at something that you enjoy doing to relax that's not tech involved. Maybe read a book, maybe have a bath. Bath tends to be good. It seems to be what a lot of us are suggesting. Why? Increase in body temperature then means you get a decrease afterwards. I can initiate that temperature drop by stimulating a slight increase, though not a hot bath, a warm bath. And as you get out, your body will cool, and that will convince the brain that the sun's going down and it's time for bed. So bath is a good one. Meditation is also the one that I keep on wishing that children were taught at school. Time and time again, I'm talking to parents whose kids get in bed and then the brain starts working. They've got too much on emotionally, too much on cognitively, and they're processing it at night because A, they haven't had an opportunity to do it in the day because as parents we're time poor, but more importantly, they don't have the discipline to turn their heads off. And that's what meditation is. It's a gap, it's a pause button. It enables us. And people say, I can't meditate. Well, can you sit still for 30 minutes and think of nothing? No, I've got to think of something. Okay, think about a banana. Or don't think about a banana, because you're still going to be thinking about a banana if you don't think about a banana. But think of anything other than the thing that's going to cause you stress. And the more we can train ourselves to opt out of our natural thinking process. We used to daydream. I used to remember as a kid, I had nothing to do. So I used to daydream. I used to sit and look at the sun and just daydream, ponder. That's natural. To have our brain switching off is natural. These days, we don't. We get on technology, we exhaust dopamine. So we wire ourselves on technology and then we crash afterwards. That's not going to sleep, that's crashing out. And anybody that can go to sleep in less than a minute isn't great at sleeping, they're sleep deprived. So, I used to sort of talk to my mum about it. It's great, Mum, I can go to sleep and my head hits the pillow and I'm out. I didn't realise I was sleep deprived. I wasn't great at getting to sleep. So I used to think I was as good as my dad, but I was only getting 5 hours. So routines, why do routines work? It's because they have this thing called the Pavlovian effect. I don't know if anybody's come across a Russian scientist called Pavlov. He would ring a bell when he was feeding dogs. So he cooked the food, ring a bell, give the dog the food. He did that for a period of time. And then he didn't cook the food, but he rang the bell and the dogs still salivated. So they anticipated the food. And if you think about what we do when we're training a young baby to go to sleep, we'll give it a routine at night. We're very rigid with that because we can't stand being sleep deprived. So we're trying to get our baby into a routine. And babies don't like routines, they feed when they feed. And certainly there's evidence that you can teach a baby a daytime routine, but its evening routine is dictated by its hereditary. So if we're a bad baby sleeper, they'll be a bad baby sleeper. But we put a lot of effort into getting the timing of their evening feed right so that we can get them to bed on time. And we'll do the same thing in the same order every night because we're teaching the baby that they're about to go to sleep. So we're hoping that they'll quieten down, anticipating that they're going to be put in the cot. And we're hoping that they'll then be able to self-soothe because we're teaching them how to do that. And yet somehow when we get to controlling our own sleep, we throw all of this learning out of the window because we've got the opportunity to do other things. So it's not about finding the routine, it's also about doing the routine in the same order because you're teaching your brain that when you go to the bedroom, having done this routine, sleep's about to happen. Make your bedroom cool, dark and quiet like a cave. Using our phone in bed is now Britain's favourite pastime. It's more popular than having a cuddle. So it's the thing that we do most, and it's probably the thing that I'll have most conversations about in terms of if there was one thing that I wish we all did was to not use our phones in bed because it's the single biggest interrupter of sleep in my mind. It causes the brain to be active and it causes us a lot of stress and it causes us not to be able to switch off and we don't control it too well. The other things that are important in a bedroom is darkness. So blackout blinds this time of year come into their own. Things like having red lights rather than the bright white light in the rooms. Making sure that if you go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, you don't turn the lights on. So light is really important, trying to get rid of all the light leakage. Temperature, again, we talked about that, cool like a cave. Sometimes you'll find that different partners want a different temperature, so having the option for that. There's some products out there called Yin Yang Duvets. I think Eve Sleep do one where they've got different togs on different sizes. Particularly this time of the year, looking at strategies to keep the room cold. So drawing the blinds in the day, having a fan going through a damp cloth at night. So temperature is important. Sound, yes. If you've got a partner that snores, you'll all know that sound is a big issue. So getting them to lose weight is one part, but wearing earplugs, and there's lots of different types. And then prompts to sleep. So there's lots of them in the market, but it seems to be that if you get your light right, you've got one key part of it. So light and sleep go together. Dark environment, not just in the bedroom, but getting things to be dimmer before you go into the bedroom. Avoiding bright light close to sleep helps you sleep better. This is one that I've put in as a new chart. Why? Because I snore. And that's one way that I've stopped myself snoring, is mouth taping. Part of this came out of all of the information that we've got. When you look at the apps that we've got, people wear Fitbits, Aura Rings, there's downloadable apps like Sleep Score and Sleep Cycle that are free. So there's lots of data now about individuals and how they sleep and what they have problems with. And what we found is that the biggest single interrupter of sleep that we have control over is our airways. So people who smoke actually sleep worse than people who drink. And it was when Fitbit did their organisation of all of their information, it was the one thing they started to flag really quickly: don't smoke before bed, because it decreases the amount of oxygen that you're getting into the system and to your brain. And your brain likes oxygen, and it's particularly looking for it at night. And part of the benefit of breathing through your nose, it provides nitric oxide, which is good for the body, but also it slows the transmission of the oxygen into the lungs. It keeps your oxygen in your lungs for longer, and it gives you a 15% increase in oxygen into the brain. It stops you snoring, but it gives you a deeper night's sleep. And certainly for those people who've come across somebody with sleep apnea, that idea of getting oxygen into the body to the brain is a big one. You know, some people have this problem with sleep where they're waking up constantly because they're not getting the air in, and it causes the heart to slow, and then we wake up sometimes 15, 20, 30 times in the night, and that's an oxygen issue. And there's lots of books now around the importance of breathing through your nose, and it seems to be one of the things that we've lost the art of. And finally, for this one, if you can't sleep, get out of bed. Give yourself about 25 minutes. And I don't know about others that have struggled with sleep. Certainly, you get to a point where you know you've had it. You get to a point, even when you wake up in the night, you sort of know if you're going to be able to nod off. And it's pointless lying in bed awake. You know, part of us is the panic of how am I going to cope the next day? You know, am I going to be able to perform at work? The answer is no, not as good as you would have done had you slept properly, but you're still going to be able to perform. And I had a friend of a friend who came recently, and we were talking about, you know, I was treating his wife's back, and he came for a sleep coaching session, and he sort of sat down and he was talking about how much caffeine he needed to give up and everything. I said, so what happens? He goes, well, I go to bed at 2 and I have to get up at 6. Okay. And I get 6 hours. I said, well, go to bed at 12 then. He goes, well, I can't. I've got too much on. And that's it. If we've got too much on and we don't allow ourselves the opportunity to sleep, we're never going to sleep. And part of it is to get that sleep routine right. The more we get the sleep routine right, the more we get our head into a space where we nod off rather than crash out. And that's the thing with the meditation. Meditation is very close to deep sleep. It has a similar delta wave. So one of the easiest ways of giving yourself good sleep is to meditate at night and exercise in the day, because that will give you the propensity to sleep. But certainly if you get into bed and you know you're wired, there is no point in being there. And it does the opposite of that Pavlovian effect. It's now telling your brain that it's somewhere you don't sleep rather than somewhere you do. And as an aside, I do hypnotherapy, I will never ever hypnotize somebody who isn't 100% going to quit smoking. I won't touch it with a barge pole. Why? Because I know they'll fail, and I know the moment they fail, they'll think that they are somebody who can't quit smoking. And that's the problem with lying in bed awake. I'm now somebody who can't get to sleep, rather than somebody who hasn't prioritized sleep. I'm now in the ballpark of, I just can't do it. So once I tell myself I can't do it, I won't do it. And that's the problem of bed equals awake rather than bed equals sleep. And it's probably the biggest single problem with using your phone in bed, is that now my brain is associating something. And I don't know if anybody's got animals and you've house trained them, or, you know, you don't play around with it. You know, you don't play around with margins with animals. You go to the toilet outside the house, you never do it so that's what we're doing with our brain. We are animals, and we are subconsciously telling our brain, lie in bed and stay awake. And that's probably, you know, one of the things that we don't realize is it's better to be outside of the bedroom and start again than keep on trying to sleep when there's no way you can. And I think that's a good time to take a break, if that's okay. So coming to this part of the presentation, these are my favorites. These are the things that I've done to help myself get to sleep. So I'm sort of using as a sample of one of what's worked for me. But when you look at what's available now on the market, because of the problem and how many of us are having problems with sleep, it seems like there's a new sleep product that comes up every day. So there's sleep formulas as sort of vitamins and minerals to take. There's binaural beats that we play in our ears. There's blue light blocking glasses. There's all sorts of chilly pads for the bed and different blankets and weighted blankets. These are the three that I've found have worked for me, and they're more practical suggestions in terms of things to add into your evening routine. So we're going to look at meditation, breathing techniques, and we're going to look at progressive muscle relaxation. So we'll start with a little bit about meditation. And there's lots of them out there now, these meditation tapes. And they vary in terms of what they're asking you to focus on. So I like the ones that help me get away from thinking about something. You know, the sorts of meditations that I like to do are to imagine walking along a beach and picking up different things. Or maybe going shopping and finding out about what I'm going to buy, although that tends to get in the way sometimes. But visualizing something that takes me away from what I'm doing. And it can be a visualization, it can be a meditation technique, it can be listening to sounds, so playing sounds of the sea. Or it could be yoga nidra, which combines all of them. But meditation takes a little bit of practice. The idea is that we build that into our routine, and it causes a decrease in your brainwave activity, so it gets you closer to being asleep. And we were having a debate recently about whether meditation can replace sleep. No, it can't, but it's certainly non-sleep deep rest, and the delta wave that it produces has benefit to us. But it's certainly something to use if you're trying to get yourself away from being wired but not and tired to being unwired and tired. So moving to the one that's probably used by most people, it's something called the 4-7-8 technique. And this was designed in terms of using our breath. We know that if we breathe out longer than we breathe in, we change our nervous system from being parasympathetic, which is adrenalizing, to being, from being sympathetic, which is adrenalizing, to being parasympathetic, which slows the heart rate down. So slowing your breathing down and breathing out longer than you breathe in slows the heart rate, and it's relaxing. So the idea with this technique, and if you'd like to try it with me, is that you stick your tongue on your teeth, you breathe in for 7, breathe in for 4, you hold for 7, and you breathe out for 8. So it's breathe in for 4, hold for 7, and breathe out for 8. And as you breathe out, you'll feel your diaphragm dropping, which is another part of health. Our diaphragm is a key part of our stability of the spine, actually, in terms of, you know, as an osteopath, I'm always talking about core and diaphragmatic breathing, because if you learn to use our diaphragm to breathe and breathe through your nose, you'll learn the ability to relax yourself by being to fully breathe out. So this technique's a good one for people who like using their breath. If they find breathing and noticing our breathing and getting back into our breath work is easy. The next, second one and the last one is progressive muscle relaxation. This can be from the bottom of your body to the top of your body, or from the top to your bottom. The one that comes up a lot on TikTok is called the military technique. And that involves more relaxing the face and the body going down. But the one that's most often taught is progressive muscle relaxation from the bottom up. And what you're trying to do is to tense and relax each part of your body in sequence. So from curling up your toes. So you breathe in and curl up your toes, and you breathe out and you let your toes relax. And again, you're trying to breathe out at least as many seconds as you're breathing in, ideally more. So you start with your toes, you curl them under, relax. Then you do your calves, squeeze them, relaxed. Then your thighs, squeeze and relax. Your buttocks, squeeze and relax. You start to go up your body and you end up wrinkling your face up, squeeze and relax. Now, part of the thing is, and I don't know if anybody's ever come across this, when somebody turns around to you and say, for God's sake, relax, and you're going, I am relaxed. Well, go on then, relax. Yeah, but I'm chilled. And you can't make yourself feel relaxed because your muscles are where they're at. So I can't, go, okay, relax, go on, relax. I can't. But if I do that and let it go, I have the sensation of relaxing. And that's what you're trying to do with that technique. You're squeezing to let go, and that gives you the sense of letting go. So if you're relaxed and you don't need the technique, that's great. But if you're tight, make yourself tight to let it go. And focus on your body, not your brain. And that's the idea of all of these techniques, is to get us out of thinking, to get us out of projected thinking. We're one of the few species, I guess, never asked anybody else if there's another species, but I think our ability to project into the future, our ability to think ahead is what's enabled us to develop as a species. What we also think is we know that REM sleep, is the ability for us to socialize comes from that. So when you put the combination of that into the modern world, the thing that we have most problems with is our thinking. We get stressed by the amount of things that we're thinking about, the amount of things that we're doing, and we get stressed by our time management, which is the thing that we were talking about at the start of the presentation. Prehistorically, the amount of hours that you were awake were dictated by the amount of hours that you were asleep. The body wouldn't have deprived itself of sleep. In fact, we can't put sleep in the bank. We're supposed to sleep on a 24-hour basis, and whatever you don't get, you tend to catch up the next day. We're the only animal that deprives ourselves of sleep on purpose. And the consequences of it we're now seeing in terms of a lot of the diseases or morbidity that are coming up to do with lack of sleep. The problem that we've got as sleep coaches is we're not giving people enough information of what the benefit of sleep is on a daily basis. But certainly we know that in terms of function at work, it's improved. In terms of cognitive ability, it's improved. In terms of days off sick, it's improved. But we haven't quantified it enough. If you think about the amount of us that don't have a good enough pension, myself included, if you ask me to put something in the bank today for when I'm 80, I'm less likely to do it than if you ask me to put something in the bank today to have it tomorrow. And I think that's the problem that we've all got, is that as human beings, we've got too much on, we've got too much to do, we've got too few times, and we don't allow ourselves to manage our time. Once we manage our time, we can manage our stress. And sleep isn't about what happens at night, it's about how I manage my day. I can tell you roughly what I've got on today. I can tell you roughly now that I'll be okay, I'll go to bed on time because I haven't got any stupid deadlines that I've agreed to do tomorrow. I haven't got too many patients to treat this afternoon. I haven't got my daughter to give a lift to. So I know roughly that I'm going to get to bed when I promise myself I do. And as a sleep coach, I do mess around with my boundaries because I'm a human being and I do like to do stuff. I do like to vary what I do, but I do know the more I keep myself consistent and the more I've got time to do those sorts of techniques, the better I am at getting to sleep. And I do know what it feels like to be sleep deprived versus slept enough. And it's a big difference. I have a better day, guaranteed. This is what you do to generate a perfect night's sleep. And we're talking about, you start a long way in advance. You monitor your caffeine, that's at the start. And then you get to sort of before bed, you don't eat too late, 3 hours before. Hopefully there'll be this will come up on the recording of it. Food is probably, apart from technology, the thing that we get wrong with regards to sleep. Poor sleep equals poor food equals poor sleep. And certainly our culture now is to eat more in the evening than it is at breakfast. And it will take you a while to get out of that. But certainly if you can avoid eating too much in the evening and trying to eat more in the day, your metabolism improves and your sleep will improve with it. Alcohol we talked about, try and avoid it within 2 hours of bed, why it disrupts REM sleep. And really it's your boundaries around tech that I think is the tipping point for most of us. And it's not about just tech in bed, it's can I put it down early enough to invest in something else that will help me to wind down and get a good night's sleep. Most of us have got too much to do, as we said, and I'll often talk, I treated somebody yesterday and we were talking about, so I've got to go to bed at 11 o'clock, yeah, but I want to watch the TV because that's my me time. That's the only time I can get to myself because I've done my job, done that, got the kids off. So I don't have any me time if I don't watch the TV. And that's a choice, and I think the problems that we've all got is trying to juggle life versus sleep rather than what we would have done prehistorically, which is to put sleep first. This is one of the final nudges around tech. It's not just about blue light. You'll see on the chart here, the top part is time displacement. That's the problem, time displacement. We get so engrossed in it that we don't put a boundary around it. So why not put an alarm on your phone? That would be one way around it. The other one that we got here, psychological stress. We talked a little bit about it before, but certainly I see it more in teenagers than I do in adults, the attachment to our phones. Now, what actually happens when you're on your phone is you get an increase in adrenaline and you get an increase in dopamine. Once I'm off my phone, I get a decrease in dopamine and a decrease in dopamine feels, I don't feel as happy. Don't feel as happy, something might be wrong. I wonder what's going on when I'm not on TikTok or I'm not connected on Instagram or I'm not listening to it. So I wonder what's going on with the thing that I've just put down, and that fear of missing out, certainly for teenagers, has a massive impact on their attachment. Now, the problems with phones is we're not multitasking, we're multi-connecting. And I don't know if anybody's got the same thing, is if you hear certain pings on your phone, you know the difference between a WhatsApp and an email and an Instagram. So, and you know the difference between a text message. So we're having a conversation and a text message comes through, it might be my daughter. So now I'm involved in the phone and this conversation. And then the next one I've got an email that might be in an appointment. So now I've got 3 things going on in my head and I am multi-connecting, not multitasking. And multi-connecting is not efficient and it speeds my brain up. And that's the problem, in that it's psychologically stressful 9 times out of 10 to be on your phone, unless you're using it to listen to a sleep meditation. Most of us get more wound up when we're on technology. And certainly, there's evidence that you look at children's behavior, if they're on devices, is affected. Children's emotional stability is affected by being attached to phones, and we're in the same ball game. So mobile technology certainly has interrupted sleep, and it's not just about the blue light that we talked about. The blue light is the one that everybody will sort of talk about. It's not that big a deal, and it's less of a deal if you go out in the day and get all of that exposure and you turn your apps and you put the nighttime mode on it. Exposure to light as we're going towards sleep is just as important, but certainly technology seems to be the thing that I'll have most conversations, particularly with parents, about. And I think that's come to the end. So I'd love some questions, and thanks for listening.